You're listening to the NCF&B podcast, part of the OG Podcast Network. The NCF&B podcast takes you behind the scenes of North Carolina's food and beverage industry. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at NCFBpod. This episode sponsored in part by Food Scene. That's FoodSEEN.com, providing professional photography, social media management, video production, and website design. And now, enjoy the show.
This week's episode is devoted to Thrive NC, presented by Blue Cross Blue Shield, North Carolina. Thrive NC is a 2-day event featuring an immersive culinary experience with contributions from top chefs, restaurants, live music, and an opportunity to give back through community service. The event was kicked off with a collaborative summit to engage the community in meaningful conversations to address statewide food system challenges.
When I lay my burden down, no more Monday, no more Tuesday. When I lay my burden down.
That is the voice of the keynote speaker for Thrive NC, Bryant Terry. Singing a song that he would often hear in his grandmother's kitchen, he connected us to a food memory from his childhood and then began to speak to an auditorium filled with North Carolinians determined to improve our state's food system. We sat down with Bryant Terry, a James Beard Leadership Award-winning chef, educator, and an author renowned for his activism to create a healthy, just, and sustainable food system. We have the honor of speaking with Bryant Terry, who is from Memphis, Tennessee.
That's right, born and raised.
So you have a good feel of the South, but you do call your home in Oakland, is that right?
That's right. Have been living in Oakland for probably 15 years now.
And so, Bryant, you are a previous James Beard Award winner, I believe 2015 Leadership Award honoree.
Yeah.
You are the keynote speaker here today. How did we get you to come out here to North Carolina and preach to us? How did we do that?
You know, I've been coming to North Carolina for the past several years. I've had the opportunity to speak at Duke and Appalachian State and University of Asheville. And so I feel like I have a kind of budding relationship with the state and many organizations. And I just feel like in this region, North Carolina is really on the cutting edge, you know. I've gotten a chance to visit a number of community-based organizations, larger NGOs that are dealing with health and food and farming issues. And so I'm always thinking about how can we make an intervention in this region, you know? Right. I think a lot of people are familiar with the stats that come out every year around the rates of obesity, based on states. And typically the top 10 states, the majority of them are in the South. Thankfully, North Carolina isn't. You guys are doing some great work, but there's a lot of work to be done in this region, and I was really excited about Thrive NC because I see this as a model that other states could take on. I mean, I think, this is the first gathering. One of the things that I think is great about it is that they're really open to feedback about how to improve for next year. So I expect the Thrive NC 2019 to be even more awesome. But I do think it really requires, for us to address this issue in a serious way, it requires bringing all these different stakeholders to the table to come up with solutions that make sense for everyone.
So, before the microphones were turned on, I was mentioning how we were just at the James Beard Awards, and of course, you being a former honoree as well. We were speaking to someone in your neighborhood, so to speak, Dominique Kren, who won for Best Chef West. Mm-hmm. And in her speech, where she just kind of stopped the show, and she forced everyone to physically stand, the theme of the show was Rise, right? And we talked to her afterwards, and we asked her why she did that, and she's like, well, because We do a lot of talking in this industry about social development, about help. But her point was, look, I'm going to physically ask you to do something today to maybe inspire in some sort of Pavlovian response that when something is bad, you have to react. You can't just say retweet, like, and clap, but to get out there. And that's something that's near and dear to your heart.
You know, a lot of people know me as an author, or they may have seen me make an appearance on television. But it's important to recognize that I started off as a grassroots activist around these issues. I was deeply concerned about young people and, you know, everything that young people are dealing with in a lot of the historically marginalized communities, having very little access to healthful food, the high rates of these preventable diet-related illnesses, you know, at younger and younger ages, like type 2 diabetes. I think they used to call it adult onset diabetes, but now you have kids, you know, 10, 11, 12 who are getting type 2 diabetes. And so being inspired by the Black Panthers and the work that they were doing in Oakland in the 60s and the 70s, I just felt like I had to do something. And so I created an organization that worked directly with young people. So that period where I was working with young people on the ground, that informs everything that I do now. I mean, I feel like the activist lens is the way that I see the world. And so even as the chef in residence, I mean, to be clear, Moad does not have a cafe, nor do we have a restaurant. And so the title really means that I'm in residence to create programming for the public. And so we do everything from, I don't know, the first event we did was entitled Black Women, Food and Power. And we brought in some scholars and food writers and journalists to talk about, you know, the role of Black women kind of historically and contemporarily around, you know, food issues. You know, we converted the lobby of the museum into an actual dining room and had a 9-course meal tracing food throughout the African diaspora to California. And so for me, it's really about, you know, how can I use my platform to, and that's why I love this event, because I feel like what this event does is what I'm always preaching. You know, it's one thing to just talk about the issues, but I think we also have to celebrate. You know, there's so much exciting stuff happening in this region. I mean, there's such a robust food scene itself. And so these are the type of things that I think we should celebrate. You know, everything isn't bleak. It's always in you know, the Tao Te Ching, they talk about 10,000 joys and 10,000 sorrows happening simultaneously. And so
that positivity kind of manifests itself into probably more participation. But it is nice to have this forward thought that, hey, I am going to enjoy myself, but tomorrow I'm going to make a step in the right direction to figure out solutions. Is there anything that you would give advice to somebody listening, like what it would be like baby steps for understanding the way to help this food movement?
I always talk about in terms of, you know, how an everyday person can get involved in these issues. I always talk about the 3 C's of change, and that's just kind of like my shorthand way of thinking about contributing to positive transformations of our food system. You know, consumer change is important. I think that when you spend your money at a Walmart, for example, that is having an impact, sending a message that's completely different than when you're spending it at a mom and pop store that's in your community, and you're ensuring that the dollars that you spend are going to support an actual family and not just going back to some corporate headquarters that's far off away from your community. And so I always talk about spending in accordance with your values. Every dollar you spend is a vote for the type of food system that you want to see. And so we need to be supporting small farmers. We need to be supporting independent artisans and local businesses. And so I think that's a great place to start. But we like that can be the only thing that we're doing, and I think that's where a lot of people get stuck, and they feel, you know, people feel good about it. Hey, I'm shopping at Whole Foods, or, you know, I go to the farmer's market every Saturday. I think it's a selfish approach, because a lot of people who have enough disposable income to pretty much shop wherever they want, they can make those decisions. But what about those who are, you know, they don't have a lot of
a different economic
money,
level.
You know, people in the impacted communities. What can we do to ensure that they have access to these foods? You know, a buddy of mine said that in the neighborhood in which he does a lot of food justice work, you can find a gun quicker than you can find an organic apple. And so how can we change systems and structures to ensure that the type of people living in those neighborhoods have some access to good food? And so I understand that everyone isn't going to commit their whole life to being like a food activist or a food justice activist, but this is such a systemic problem that any way you contribute, I think, would make a big deal. Whether it's, donating your dollars, volunteering your time, going to that community garden and helping to clean up and harvest, teaching people how to cook if that's your expertise, teaching people how to can and pickle and preserve, like giving people in communities the tools so that they can feel empowered to really take charge of their own lives. And then lastly, I'll just say, we have to be engaged as citizens. Like, these are structural problems. There are a lot of policies in place that prevent many communities from thriving, that prevent small farmers from thriving. And so how can we ensure that we're putting people first of all, holding the people that we've put in the office already accountable,
right,
and ensuring that they're making decisions.
They have responsibilities right now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But if they're not, then they got to go. And we need to make sure that the people we're putting in there are actually making decisions in the best interest of everyday eaters and not just the multinational corporations.
So vote is a very important thing, or at least take an interest in the issues that are happening around.
Certainly.
We actually just had our voting day yesterday.
Oh, okay, great.
And so hopefully, that's the thing, is it's real easy to just say, oh, well, let's vote someone new in. Well, is the new person going to have the same, agenda as the previous? A lot of times, not to talk ill of politicians, but one of the things they're best at doing is getting elected.
Yeah.
So we need people that are their primary goal is electing change and making some things happen. Parenting is really important, and a lot of times you hear social issues about how can the school make it better for my children. Maybe a lot of times it's about just being an excellent parent and actually, as a parent, helping the school. And there's a novel thought, right? And so, you freaked me out a little bit when you talked about the dystopian future that we may have in years to come. But it's not a surreal future that could easily happen.
I mean, look, there are many people who are living this dystopian future right now.
Yeah.
If you think about people living in Flint, Michigan, and they haven't had clean water for several years, you think about many communities that are near these factory farms, and
it's not acceptable.
It's like we're there, but I think the problem is going to grow and it's going to spread if we don't do something to curb it. I just want to say that it's easy to have this kind of like narrow focus on food issues, and I think we have to focus on food, but while we're looking at food, we need to think about these many systems at play. We need to talk about wage inequity. We need to talk about these horrible segregated schools that are failing our children. We need to talk about the criminal justice system, and I think all these things are actually interconnected. The great thing about this political moment that we're in, where people are rising up, you're seeing like a resurgence in the women's movement, you're seeing like a resurgence in the civil rights movement in a certain way with Black Lives Matter, you're seeing people who are just really pushing back against this administration and all the evil stuff that it's doing. And I think this is a great opportunity to think about how can the food movement align with many of these other social movements and think about commonalities, common goals, and really grow, because the food movement has been kind of like it hadn't been a really cohesive movement over the past 3 decades.
I don't think it knew it was a movement.
Right.
I mean, I think we want it to be a movement, so we're starting to call it a movement.
Exactly.
But by doing that, we're unifying ourselves. And it is a subculture. It is an industry that does create a lot of social change, because what's something that everybody does? We all eat.
We all eat, right?
Yeah. And I mean, I have that one buddy that doesn't care about what he eats. He's like, food is just fuel, bro. And he's like super yoked and has no friends.
I'm just gonna do protein gel.
But aside from him, it's a way of community building love. It's a way to show like your humanity towards everyone, and like that's the beauty about the culinary world right now. When you're watching a Chinese American and you're watching an African American, you're watching an Indian American cook in this country and show the things that they've learned from their ancestry. Mm-hmm. It's not just about the spices and the ingredients. It's about why and how that came to be.
Yeah.
That's peasant food, that's street food, that's whatever. Well, we throw those words around, but it's like, no, those were like lower economic social reasons. But guess what? They made something delicious.
Yes.
And they made life delicious by making those things happen. And so it's really inspirational. And now we can look at it and kind of hopefully advance our understanding of why we do these things. Like people always kid around like, what's a burrito? That means little donkey. Did you ever just take the word and figure out burro, ito, burrito? It's like you think about little things, why those things are made a certain way.
Yeah.
But that's all, at least I hope, is that people take a moment to understand why these words exist, why these foods exist, why we learn them, why we love them. And hopefully with that understanding, you can project that towards the future, towards your family, to your kids and your community. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. I know you got to get going. You got cities to save and get out there. But we want you on a plane. We want you in new cities and new areas and preaching this out. By the way, beautiful voice. I might have to start. I was recording then, so if you don't mind.
Oh, when I was singing earlier? Okay.
That was inspirational. That might have to be the top of this segment right here, just to kind of put you in the right mood. But Chef.
And I mentioned this, and I just want to kind of double down on that. I think this has to be a spirit and heart-led movement. At the end of the day, real people are suffering and dying. We could talk a lot about, I often think about this whole, because I think one of the responses I often hear when you talk about people choosing to eat processed food, packaged food, fast food, is that, well, it's cheaper, right?
Right.
And
easier. It's accessible.
Yeah, it's accessible. Right. It's easier. It's cheaper. It's what makes sense when you're, low income. Mm-hmm. And I'll say this is not in any way to blame the victim, because I understand the complicated reasons that, people living in those situations, I understand why they make those decisions. But I think we all need to just be thinking about the long term. It's one thing to say, well, it's cheap and easy now, but what are the costs later in life? What are the emotional costs, to your family and friends when you're sick and dying, way too young? What are the cost of, the increased, bills and healthcare costs that you're going to be paying? And so that's just one example of how I think we just have to really think about the long game, and while surviving in the moment. Right. Because I'm not one, I'm like I said, I'm not trying to shame anyone, and I understand why people make those decisions, but I think, we just have to ensure that we can support people in making different decisions and having a different reality.
To that point, I've always had this opinion, and I don't know how you feel about it, but government subsidies when it comes to beef, when it comes to to make a Big Mac, and sorry, McDonald's, I'm just using you as an example. You're not the only one. You're one of them.
They're a big one.
They're a good one, and it's delicious. But that's the sad part. But I don't know. You have a book called Afro Vegan, so I don't know if you're eating.
I had Big Macs back in the day. I know about Big Macs.
You got to triple down on that carb load, right? Two buns wasn't enough.
Yeah.
But when a Big Mac is, what is it, $1.99 or so? That's kind of embarrassing that something that has 3 pieces of bread, 2 patties, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, onions on a peg, sesame seed bun, whatever. We know the jingle. Yeah. But all of those things, the way how much effort and time and whatever, even if the product is considered a low quality, it's still at one point was grain, it was wheat, it was a cow, it was a cucumber, it was all those things, and somebody had to put it together and make it, and now we're pumping them out for $1.99, and on Tuesdays 99 cents. How are we doing that? But a lot of it is from government subsidy.
Well, yeah, and that's what Michael Pollan often talks about, the ways that these foods are artificially cheap. They're cheaper because many of the products that are used to produce fast food and crappy processed and packaged foods, what if we shifted those subsidies to support small and mid-scale farmers? What if we shifted those subsidies to support these community-based organizations that are doing things like building urban farms and community gardens?
Right.
And so I think it's easy to get caught up in this idea that, these foods are cheap, because that's letting our government off the hook.
Right.
Once again, when the farm bill comes up, we need to be, having some say in how these monies are used, and we do not need to be subsidizing. I mean, this is like corporate welfare at its finest, like subsidizing these
and it's
wealthy multinational corporations.
Sure, McDonald's supposedly is a large taxpayer towards our economy, so maybe that has something to do with,
do they pay taxes?
but that was the point I was going to make is, when you're talking about shopping local and you've got most of these big businesses are filing all their taxes offshore and funneling things in, so they're Apple might be the biggest criminal of them all.
Exactly.
And legally speaking, they are following the letter of the law, but maybe that's the problem, is the law isn't correct. So again, going back to being informed of social change and what we're doing for ourselves, this whole world is created by the people that are around us and the generations that were previous to us. So we can do whatever the heck we want.
Yeah.
So maybe if we're upset about the way things have gone for a certain time, we just make that change.
Yeah.
So it is up to us, and the time is now. And it's a rote and cliched thing to say, but it's been said for a while. So it's time to actually
keep saying it though. Keep saying it
and do something.
Well, keep saying it, and then we need to be active, because the decisions we're making now. I mean, we're literally creating history in this moment.
Yeah.
And I think people need to understand that these decisions, as small and as insignificant as they may seem, they're shaping the future for our children and grandchildren. And so I truly believe that, there's a consciousness that's growing, and a lot of people are, living a different reality, trying to create a different future. But we just have to continue to grow the movement, and that takes, it's a long game. Like if you think about most movements throughout the 20th century, like they took years, if not decades, to kind of reach these crescendos. And I think that we need to understand that, but like all the small steps that we can take towards kind of getting to that tipping point make a difference. And that's why I don't want people to feel helpless. I want people to feel like, seemingly insignificant small steps, I want them to know that they make a big difference.
Yeah.
It's like drops in a bucket, One drop seems very insignificant, but once you have
everyone keeps
swell of
putting
that,
it in,
then it's just like it's overflowing. So,
well, Bryant Terry, thank you very much for taking time to speak with us here in North Carolina at the Thrive NC event. Even Blue Cross Blue Shield was one of the main supporters, is the main supporter of this, showing that even in healthcare that they're concerned. Hey, man, we want people to be healthy. It's actually good for our brand. It is nice when certain even bigger companies are out there to kind of support and get us moving forward. So, thank you for being here. We will keep our eyes out and ears for your next endeavor.
When it comes to vodka, it starts at the farm. Social House Vodka sources corn locally from a farmer who plants non-GMO corn. And because it's made from corn, it's also gluten-free. Social House Vodka comes from Kinston, North Carolina, and sources water from the ancient Black Creek Aquifer. Social House Vodka. Live socially, enjoy responsibly.
All right, I'm catching up with the man, the myth, the legend himself, Mr. Sam Jones, for a second. Hey, Sam, great to see you here in Raleigh. Can you just talk about for a couple minutes why you decided to get involved with Thrive and what you're doing here?
Yeah, they reached out to us a few months back about doing a demo, and as well as being out here where you and I are standing right now, doing some tastings and letting people see what we do. And so last night we did a demo. It was curated by the James Beard Foundation, which was a lot of fun. It's about sustainability and repurposing food instead of throwing it away and things such as that. And so tonight is kind of lax for me as far as not doing that type of thing, but we're out here on whatever street we're on doing what we do, which is chopping pork, making pork sliders.
Nice. And there's a huge line behind me, and Sam was nice enough to take a couple of minutes. Well, and yeah, the Brunswick stew last night looked awesome, and the demo was cool and really educational about how people can, like you said, repurpose all the food. So I know that's a big movement through Blue Cross Blue Shield for Thrive NC, and I'm sure it's a huge testament to what they're doing, the fact that you're lending your name to this.
Well, I try to walk the talk.
Yeah.
So anytime I can help in North Carolina, because we travel so much, as so many of us do all over the country, you don't get to do a lot at home.
Yeah.
And so the closer I can be to home to help, that's what I want to do. And so it's kind of a no-brainer smashing of the Jeopardy button when they reached out to us about helping.
Right on. Before we let you go, if you have like one major tip, 2 tips, 3 tips, quick things for like people can do at home to repurpose food and help with our food waste problem, what would it be?
What a stew is what immediately came to mind when we were having a phone conversation about that demo. You talk about food waste, and so think about when you put something in the refrigerator, don't let it be purgatory. Meaning, don't let it stay in there for a week before you put it in a trash can because it makes you feel better about yourself. Do something with it. If it's feed it to your animal, do something with it instead of sending it to the landfill. All your stews, I don't care what kind of stew it is, was born from survival, repurposing of food. And so do something with the food. Even if it's not a human being eating it, give it to an animal. There's so many people, humans, animals that go hungry every single day. And it blew my mind last night to hear Kris say that 40% of food that is prepared in this country gets thrown away. A staggering, absolutely staggering. So don't let somebody else be the solution and you don't be part of the problem.
Boom. Sam, thanks. I appreciate it, man. Always great to see you.
This segment is brought to you by the Triangle Wine Company. Visit Triangle Wine Company stores in Morrisville, Cary, and Southern Pines, North Carolina. Or order your wine and beer online at trianglewineco.com. And be sure to use our promo code NCFB to receive 10% off your purchases. Triangle Wine Company.
I am your co-host, Max Trujillo.
And I am your co-host, Matthew Weiss, and we are in downtown Raleigh, North Carolina during the Thrive NC event, and we are speaking to 2 very special guests from the James Beard Foundation, the Vice President, Mr. Kris Moon, and the Food Policy Advocate, Ms. Catherine Miller. Welcome.
Thanks so much for having us.
Well, before we turned the mics on, we were just kind of getting familiar with each other, and of course, we would be remiss if we didn't just mention what just happened a few days ago. So all of us, I imagine, we're all in Chicago at the Lyric Civic Auditorium, Lyric Opera House for the 2018 James Beard Awards, and you two had something to do with it, I imagine. It was the first time that we were invited, and we were there as media, and so we were backstage, and we had our videographer on the red carpet asking ridiculous questions and having a great time. It was really a time of our lives. But Kris, let's at least start off right there. We were talking about the awards and how impactful this specific award ceremony was. I'd love to just get a little take on how you were talking about the evolution of it and where it is today.
Sure. Yeah, no, it was a really special year for us, and I think for a variety of reasons. But we really the theme of this year's awards was Rise, which was really meant to be a celebration of the way that the culinary community always rises to the occasion. And I think we've seen that so many times in the last year, whether it be after natural disasters or coming to the aid of their communities. The culinary community is just always there. They're the first ones to say yes and jump in and to help make things right. And so between that fact and the fact of the work that we're doing through our impact programs, we really wanted to just showcase that community in that way this year, to really put a spotlight on those individuals. And so the Rise theme really played out across all of our awards events this year. And we asked the community to say what they rise for. Do they rise for equality? They rise for diversity? They rise for good food and deliciousness, or equity at the table, childhood nutrition? So many really empowering and wonderful answers that were shared, and that's what we put on display at this ceremony. And I think, as we were talking about a little bit earlier, this year is also a very poignant time, just given what's happened generally in our country and even globally when it comes to all of the various challenging topics that we've been dealing with. And so it really struck a chord that was the theme for this year, and it was an opportunity to look ahead, look forward, celebrate the positive and the things that we all get out of bed for in the morning, and to recognize that on this national stage. And as I said to you earlier, I think it was a very different night for us than a lot of other James Beard Awards, and we've already seen that in some of the media wraps that have come out in the last couple of days. diversity of individuals who were nominated from the semifinalist list to the nominee list to those who were represented on stage this year, both ethnic diversity, gender diversity, kind of the full gamut, was unlike ever before at the James Beard Awards, and I think that was incredibly encouraging and a beautiful nod to the direction that I think we as an organization are heading and want to continue to head.
Even in culinarily, with having a pitmaster represent Southeast as the best chef in the region, that right there, it's almost like like the Oscars tend to be stuffy and comedies and musicals tend to get overlooked, and yet they're still amazing projects. And it's like, so why would something that's so impactful to the community not get represented? Not that I'm comparing Will Ferrell to Rodney Scott, but in that idea of everybody's putting a lot of work out there, and we spoke with Rodney. It's like there's a lot of sweat equity that goes into being a pitmaster and finally getting recognition by his peers who are known as quote unquote chefs. He himself is putting a lot of effort out in that community too. So it was a very interesting and cool year.
And I think it's a really great evolution of the Beard Awards. We've seen it a little bit in the past. Chris Bianco at Pizzeria Bianco in Arizona has been recognized. Superiority Burger in New York was nominated last year. It's a burger joint. And so I think as the Beard Awards progress and we continue to recognize the way the food industry and community in the United States progressed and morphs and evolves, the hope is that the awards reflect that, right? That they are a mirror of what's going on out there in the culinary community. And I think that's a perfect example, right? You have a pitmaster who's being celebrated for his barbecue and is so integral to the community and is being recognized on a national stage, just as he should be.
Yeah, it's almost as if it's a call to consciousness and a rise for mindfulness all around. And we see it in our community that, and we talked about this on our episode that released today, is that it's not just about being a chef anymore and leading a kitchen, but it's really being leaders in community. And we so much see that here with Ashley and Vivian and Katie up in Asheville, that these people are really like activists, and just like Bryant Terry was, like, as he said, he started as an activist and now has become a chef only almost so he could speak the language, right. So, and it's amazing that you guys have really caught on to that, but joined it as well.
Well, and I think, there was some very specific instruction given this year that came out in the news that was given to the awards committees and the awards judges that, the James Beard Awards are a symbol of excellence. And when somebody is nominated for one or receives one, they should embody what it means to be a great leader, that it's more than just the best gastronomic experience you could possibly deliver, but that actually you're looked to as a leader in this industry, and that this year for the first time we really publicly gave that directive that the voters should consider the leadership qualities of the people that they were voting on, and do they embody what it means to be a leader in this industry and somebody that everyone should look up to. And I think, again, in the winners that we saw on stage on Monday night, it really that played out, and I felt really proud of what the awards judges and committees accomplished this year.
Yeah, love that. So let's talk about why we're here today, why you guys are in North Carolina. Thank you for being here, and talk a little bit about the mission, and how James Beard Foundation is partnering with Thrive and being involved in this.
No, it's really exciting to be back here in North Carolina. I mean, as we think about the leaders who are here, Ashley Christensen, Katie Button, Chidi Kumar, Andrea Rusing, Keith Rhodes in the eastern part of the state, right? This diversity of chef voices.
You can't mention a guy's name after all of those ladies. We love Keith, but he doesn't
there
fit.
are some good men in this fight in North Carolina.
Thank you.
And we need both men and women at the table to make the change that we need.
That is
Plus,
right.
He's really leading in the eastern part of the state related to seafood. So we love Keith and William Disson and all these other great men here in North Carolina who are doing amazing things. But
that's right.
Most importantly, these chefs, male and female, within their communities are doing things that go beyond the plate. right, that go beyond just their sourcing, going on just beyond their relationships, but really how they're deepening their ties to community-based organizations that are helping our most vulnerable, whether that be students, whether that be veterans, whether that be families of the tens of thousands of people, the millions of people in North Carolina that are food insecure, right? And so with Thrive, we're really excited to be here in a partnership with Blue Cross Blue Shield North Carolina, who understands that food impacts everything. It impacts our local communities, it impacts our health, it impacts our schools, our ability to thrive, it impacts jobs and economic creation. And so how do you bring all that together? Well, chefs are certainly one of the most powerful, visible voices to help us do that. So we're really excited to be here.
I was really impressed, though, in some of the breakouts that were happening. Speaking of a chef, Chef Stephen Devereaux Green was sitting on a panel with about the school lunch programs, and that, as a father myself, I'm always interested to know what kids are eating, because Matt and I, we've talked about it before. I think I had the most hilariously embarrassing school lunch environment when I was in high school, and I was in California, where a lot of people consider that to be, forward-thinking and progressive. No, it was off-school lunch, McDonald's and KFC and all that, and then at the school they would pump in Pizza Hut and Taco Bell into the cafeterias, and this was for ninth graders through senior year, and it for us, it sounded cool. Yeah, great, I get to have tacos and all that, but we're not realizing that we're doing this every single day to ourselves, and we're creating in response to these brands that you see and you're driving by and you're like, oh, I'm hungry now, and you want to go there, and the accessibility is overrun, and that breeds that.
It breeds that, but there's real history there, right? So 20 years ago, schools were required to either slash their lunch budgets or figure out how to bring resources into the schools, and that became the fast food nation of public schools in this country, right? Because a company would pay to have its brands in there, right? I mean, I'm a Gen Xer, so I remember the Coke machine in the school, right? That was a concerted effort to try and bring resources into schools, as they were stripped of resources to provide that food themselves. And now what we're seeing is a sea change back, right? We're seeing a sea change back to prepared foods, to cooked foods, to real skill in the kitchen. And in some cases, we don't yet have the infrastructure back to do that. So you might not have a kitchen that's equipped to have somebody fresh make a meal, so the meal is going to have to come from a coordinated kitchen, right? It might come in a bag that gets boiled or steamed, right? Yeah. And so these chefs are trying to bridge folks like Stephen, right? Folks like Stephanie Terry, folks
Sean
like
Fowler,
Sean Fowler, right? Like all these people are trying to figure out how we bridge that gap, that education gap. And food is the first place. I mean, we see it all the time, right? Chefs get really excited about school lunch because one, it impacts them when they finally have kids, and they're like, that's what my kids eat, right? Right, I can make something better than that, right? And the second is that's what they know how to do. They know how to go into the kitchen and help the school systems reimagine this. And then it wasn't enough just to reimagine the meal, because the meal can only be made possible if you have all the other things to support it, whether it be more reimbursements for farmers, whether it be school lunch equipment, right? So then we have to turn our attention to advocating for those things. North Carolina has one of the lowest rates of reimbursement from the state related to school meals. So you heard, Paula from Wake School District here today talking about the fact that she's probably feeding kids off less than $2.50 a meal.
And she has to have a food cost of about 40%.
Food costs are only 40%. The rest of that money goes to food safety, right? Goes to making sure that the labor is covered, all that kind of stuff. And so think about that. Like, how do you make a meal off essentially less than $1, right? And so chefs are very helpful in that, but they're also really helpful in using their platforms to raise awareness so we can get more money, more stuff.
Well, like Stephen was even saying, he's like, I think technique is a big factor here. If you take a lot of culinary students that are coming out into the world, they know what to do with a vegetable or a meat, whatever, and just educating the school lunch program employees could really go far. I mean, I'm going to say something controversial, but it was once suggested that we taught all of our teachers how to hold a gun, and that was a really crazy idea. How about we just teach our cafeteria people how to cook?
Yeah.
Is that really a bridge too far?
No, I mean, I think that's we don't think so, right? We think that these chefs here in this community are really rallying behind how we get how do we get the state legislature to spend more money on school food? How do we have to make sure that money is spent in North Carolina to the benefit of North Carolina farmers and food producers? And then how do we train and work with those school nutritionists to make sure that they actually have the skills and the staff that can make the meals in-house? Because that's going to reduce waste, it's going to promote efficiency, it means the food's going to be more delicious, and it means the kids are actually going to start to learn from the plate in school about the impacts of nutrition and local food on their own lives. So it's a win-win for everybody.
So there's one other piece of that, as I said in the conversation with Vivian, though, over lunch, is that a lot of these schools are not equipped for from scratch cooking. So when we get back to the advocacy piece and trying to bring more money into the school system and to school lunch, the need to have money to actually build out proper kitchens. So yes, the need to educate and deliver skills and actually how to prepare meals and to cook from scratch. But in many cases, the equipment is not even in place to do that. So even if they were armed with the skills, you need the operational kind of infrastructure piece to be developed first as well.
Well, actually, North Carolina is leading the way as it is in many things related to school lunch on the resurgence of school equipment. And in part because of the school districts themselves, whether it be Wake or Durham, trying to reintroduce scratch kitchen cooking, or it's the need to have moving away from centralized food production, right? Just because of transport costs and all those things. So people are finding it's actually more cost efficient to move the kitchens back into the schools than it is to prepare the food and then move it around.
Package.
Right?
Yeah. So that brings me to a question. I'm curious, what is the James Beard Foundation official platform on food insecurity? Like in terms of where do you find the solutions and what policies do you want to put in place right now to help?
Yeah, I mean, our membership is very much leading the way, right? We feel our role is to help train and empower and elevate the advocates. So we have a program called the Chefs Boot Camp for Policy and Change, where we train chefs to be better advocates. And then chefs that have gone through that program, we provide them with the resources and support to host things in their own community, to start the conversations themselves. Because we're a national organization that's best known as the arbiters of the food world and arbiters of quality. And so we feel like our job is to really train the advocates themselves and then empower them and elevate them. So we use all our social media platforms to amplify what the chefs are doing in their community. We highlight chef activity on the blog. We come to places like North Carolina. We were just here in November for a local advocacy training that we facilitated, but was hosted by Andrea and Ashley, right, as a way to bring their community together to talk about school lunch. So we've been charged with working on a variety of topics, whether they're workforce topics like women's empowerment and but to reducing food waste. And so we do some of that ourselves within our own James Beard House. But our real mission is to train the chefs and use our platform to amplify the work that they feel is most important in their community. And right now in North Carolina, those chef leaders like Chidi and Andrea and Katie and William and Keith, right, and Ashley, they think that school nutrition and school lunch is one of the priority issues for them.
Right.
And so what we do is bring that platform of Beard and our millions of social media followers and our own voice to help amplify the work that they're doing.
So if I went to one of these chef-led seminars, is that what you would call it? What would be the main, for our listeners that haven't had a chance to go to there, what would be the main takeaways that I would go home with, learning like, okay, immediately I can do this to help change my own situation?
Well, I think I'll say a bit and then I'll turn it over to Catherine. I think one of the big light bulbs that we're trying to turn on for the chefs themselves, but also that I'd say for your listeners, is that we see chefs as so much more than, as I said earlier, Catherine's beautiful line of, chefs are so much more than pretty people with sharp knives who make delicious food.
Right.
They are community leaders, they are business owners, they are parents, they are trendsetters and tastemakers. They are citizens, just like all the four of us sitting around this table, who have opinions and desires and hopes and things they want to see accomplished. And so turning on that light bulb for them to make themselves see themselves in that way is important. But I think that's a very big takeaway that we see from many of the programs that we do around advocacy work. But I would also just selfishly push that to your listeners as well, is that I think we often, as consumers, forget that chefs are so much more than people who make great food.
Right. Essentially, you are supporting or instilling the chefs as your ambassadors in each region, essentially.
Yeah, in each community. I mean, I think Bryant Terry said it best on stage today, right? We're talking about cuisine, community, and civics, right? And so we believe that anybody, whether they're a chef or a citizen or a voter or an eater, right, can make a difference by, one, voting with their pocketbook. The choices that you make, whether to be to shop at a large-scale store or a farmer's market, is an important decision that helps drive local economies, right?
Yes.
Get more involved with your local community organizations, right? If you give $10 to a charity, like, give an hour plus the $10, right?
Yeah.
So get more invested in those local organizations and get to know your community more. And then know that your civic participation, whether it be voting or signing a petition or showing up at a rally, that matters more than ever today, right? We actually have to. Food is our most political act, whether passive or active, that we make every day, right? The most important thing that we do. And so we hope that everybody who leaves, whether it be a national boot camp or a local advocacy training or just something like Thrive as a casual observer walking around and sampling great food, understands that if they use their voice and their pocketbook, they will make great change.
Yeah, because I personally feel like, and I apologize if this was already touched on because I couldn't attend all the seminars today or the breakout sessions, but I personally feel like the choice begins at home. And it begins with education of the parents. So I think that leads in perfectly with your message that it's the chefs or the leaders, because they are influencers, absolutely, and people to be looked up into in the community. But then the parents or the people at home have to make the decision that this is the style that we're going to eat, and we are going to focus on farm fresh or local food, as opposed to getting, because it's so, as we all know, it's so easy access to fast food and it's quick, that we have to make those, that the parents first have to make those decisions. So it's almost them who have to be educated and also have a light bulb turned on.
Yeah, but I think for parents, the light bulb actually comes from the kids, right? It's like realizing that moment where your kid comes home and tells you what they had for lunch, and the parent goes, "What?"
Yeah.
Right? Or not succumbing to the pressure from the kid in the grocery store who's like, "I want that." No, we're going to have this, right?
Yeah.
So it's actually funny for us. Like, we see, like, definitely education of parents, but one of the things that's been very successful in a lot of these school programs is that the introduction of fresh food or better food or more interesting food actually is the kids then going home and saying, "Make this," right? "Buy this," because we feel, I'm not a parent myself, but I've got 4 great nieces that I love dearly, and anybody who knows me spends a lot of time learning about Gracie, Tessa, Catherine, and Sam, right? and those 4 literally educate their parents every day about what they want to eat and why they want to eat it. And so the parents just listen and sort of amplify. And so, it's our responsibility as their parents or their niece or their aunts and uncles to help codify that. But listening to our kids is really a growing thing that we should all do more of.
Right. But, Bryant Terry and I said earlier, let's not let our families off the hook, and let's also not demand too much from our schools. I think that a school many times is only as good as the support that the families and the parents provide. And we knew that when we were looking for schools to go to. We saw, I went to a particular school that was in my district, and at the kindergarten orientation, there were 5 classes, 5 different teachers that had roughly about 30 kids in each class, and there were about 18 parents that showed up. That's a really small number. That's the point I'm making.
It's a really small number, right? And Vivian made that point.
Right.
It's not her kids.
Right.
It's not your kids. It's our kids.
It's our kids. And I know this. I play a pretty integral part as a community member with my children's school. I know all the kids' names, and they all know me. And it's like, because I take the time to go and do those things. And I know am pretty much a flawless human being, so I can stand on top of my perch. I'm kidding. But I know that I grew up in a household that didn't have that type of support, so I think I'm maybe doubling down and doing that. But if everybody could just do something to help out their own community, you'll find that the school your kid goes to, that the after-school sports or after-school programs you go to, all of that stuff really helps out when parents get involved, when community leaders get involved, and just, not sit back and say, "Man, why is the school got lousy food?" or "Why is this that?"
But like this is something we talk about a lot with the chefs is how do you bring people along on this journey, right? And so if only 18 parents come to the meeting, those 18 parents might want to think about how they can then bring somebody along the next time. Right? So Max calls Matt and says, hey, why didn't you show up to the meeting? You want to ride with me? Do you need help?
Yeah.
Oh, do you need childcare?
Put a little accountability.
A little
shame doesn't hurt either.
A little shame doesn't hurt, but like think about we're trying to build community.
Yeah, if
right?
18 people bring one person, that's already
double
yeah.
the number of people, right?
Just if you're getting involved, bring one extra person to the meeting, and then that's a huge impact if everybody does that. One other thing I wanted to talk about, I'm going to put you guys on the spot for a second as a foundation, but I'm assuming or hoping you have a really good answer to this. We have a lot of these events. There's a lot of food that gets served at these events, a lot of food that doesn't get eaten, especially at the awards at the foundation. Yeah. So what happens to that food after it doesn't get eaten?
Yes. Well, in fact, reducing food waste is a very large priority of our organization. And whether that be through prevention at the start, be through recovery, making sure food doesn't go into the garbage, or at the very last step, making sure that it's going to compost and not into landfill at the very, very last step. And actually, I'm really excited to share. You guys may not have heard because you were in the press room, but for the first time ever at the Beard Awards this year, we worked with a partner called Rethink Food NYC, which is a food rescue nonprofit that's also launching in Chicago. And they reclaimed any of the food that was left over at the end of the awards,
Well done.
They actually process it into meals for Chicago's neediest communities, which are being distributed later this week.
I feel so much better now because I was like trying to eat all the food just to eliminate the food waste. But
so
now I don't feel like I don't feel unfulfilled that at least the
it's the first time we've done it at the Beard Awards. I don't have the data yet. They're going to give me the data by next week in terms of amount of food that was reclaimed, number of people served, etc. But we will have that information. But it's the first time we've done it at one of our large-scale events, but we really kicked it off last summer. We instituted a composting program at the James Beard House in New York, where we do as many as 200 dinners a year. And so that was the first kind of step for us to walk the walk there. We're not doing food recovery there because the reality is that it's a very small amount because it's a tasting menu setup. So the food that is being diverted to compost is all post-consumer waste that can't be recovered because it's been served. What is actually on site that could be recovered is very, very minimal because the chefs come mostly prepped.
Right.
But it was important to put the compost piece into place for us there, and now we're starting to look. Now that we've done it at the Beard Awards, how do we walk that walk at our other national programs, our Chefs in Champaign event in the Hamptons, our Taste America tour this fall, where we're likely going to be bringing on a partner to help with that across 10 cities across the country. So very important, and I'm glad you asked the question.
No, I love it.
It's something we've been thinking about a lot as our organization. Is we're helping the chef community do better, but when the chef community is doing better, we also have to do better in our own operations.
Well, like you stole the words right out of my mouth. Thanks a lot, Kris. But that's why you are who you are, is walking the walk. And it's just funny because my wife, when we got home from the Beard Awards, and I told her, and that was the first, and it's been a hot button issue in our house about food waste and this stuff. And she said, well, what happened to all that food after there? And I was like, that's a great question. And I said, I'm going to assume that the James Beard Foundation had a plan for that food, and I'm really glad to hear that you did.
Yeah, we did. And it will sneak peek to tomorrow's demo here at Thrive. Ashley Christensen will be cooking a surprise box from Hungry Harvest, which is a sponsor here at Thrive.
They're a sponsor of our podcast.
And they're a sponsor of your podcast. So Hungry Harvest is providing her with a mystery box for her demonstration tomorrow so that she can showcase like what you can do with sort of rescued or recovered produce.
Amazing.
So that'll be a fun thing tomorrow.
Yeah, we love those guys there.
That.
Yeah.
Well, this is fantastic. Thank you so much for giving us the time to speak. I love that we were able to connect it based off of the awards ceremony that we just had. And thank you for speaking to us here.
Thank you guys for what you do, and thank you for coming to North Carolina to join us. So keep get involved in your communities, and everybody will eat and drink very merrily.
We both did before now, but who forgave her?
Well, hello, and we are speaking with Sig Hutchinson, Vice Chair of the Wake County Commission. And Sig, we kind of go way back.
Yeah.
We know each other a little bit, at least as a diner in the community. Everyone on this show knows that in the past I was the general manager over at Midtown Grill, where I think we served you a couple steaks over a course of the years.
I love the Midtown Grill, and of course the connection is food,
Right.
which is what we're talking about today.
Isn't that great?
Yeah.
It all makes sense. So we are at Thrive NC today. It is a Thursday morning. We just had Bryant Terry speak as a keynote speaker, followed by a great panel of which you were on and had some fascinating things to say. So I'm not going to speak too much. I just want to maybe ask you why and how you are contributing to Thrive NC today.
Well, I've been at this Max for 20 years, and this ties so many of the things that I work on, which is greenways, parks, open space, healthy communities, food insecurity issues. And this, as an elected official, this touches so many of the points that I'm interested in. Economic development and creating jobs around not only growing, but distributing and selling. Restaurateurs and a great foodie network with, the millennials and the hipsters who want a great food. Food insecurity with people who need this type of security of food, not only food, but quality food. Healthy, happy citizens, and finally just saving the planet. There's no reason for someone to be getting a cantaloupe from California when you can grow even a better cantaloupe right here in Wake or Johnston County.
I didn't even know that was true. I didn't know we grew cantaloupe out here.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, people don't realize it, but the soil and from Wake County to the east is some of the richest soil in the entire United States. And we're just not using that network to grow this local healthy food. Instead, we're growing tobacco and soybeans.
For the longest time, North Carolina's probably number one crop was tobacco.
Right.
Soy's been out there for a long time. Sweet potatoes are
right.
Great
Sweet
out
potatoes.
There. That's a good thing, though. And that's something we've been talking about that's really boosting our economic stature internationally. We're selling a lot of sweet potatoes all over the world. But is it fair to say that because we had such a specific infrastructure of tobacco farms, that it's taking a little while to repurpose this agriculture and also maybe make aware of businesses that, hey, we sell more than that? So is it also about just kind of understanding that the North Carolina agricultural system is going through a major renaissance and change?
Well put. I would mention two things. Number one is that these distribution networks have been developed over 100 years.
Yeah.
So to get our tomatoes and our cucumbers and our cantaloupes from California, those lines have been set up for 50, 60, 70 years. So we're just used to that. We're used to getting our strawberries from South America. And of course, we want year-round type of produce.
Sure.
So to break into those large corporate markets is difficult. The other thing is that this work is hard. It's very difficult, and if you think about all the components, somebody's got to grow it on a seasonal piece, then you've got to pick it, then you've got to aggregate it, then you have to process it, then you have to distribute it, then you have to market it, then you have to sell it, then you have to consume it, and then you've got the waste piece. Every one of those things that I mentioned is a different bucket that has to fit into a regional system, and we're not very good at looking at it from a systems perspective. From my perspective in developing a regional food network, we're working now for the first time with Orange and Durham, and we're in Wake counties to think about this from a regional systems approach and think about that circle. Think about that thing I just mentioned about growing and processing and aggregating. And how does all this system ultimately work? When I came to the conversation from Wake County, I did not want to start something. I wanted to see what was missing in the network, the regional network, and how can we tie all this together so it works as one system. Let me give you a great example. Let's say a small farmer is growing tomatoes, okay? And he is growing, say, 10 acres of tomatoes. But those tomatoes have only got a small growing season. He cannot go to, say, a Food Lion or Lowe's and say, hey, would you buy your tomatoes from me? Because Lowe's is not going to do that. But if you can get an aggregator to get all these farmers to put their tomatoes together over a longer growing season and go to Lowe's and say, we can give you local, fresh tomatoes in the bulk that you're looking for over an
level.
There you go. Then you can start to make a market. But one person can't do that. It takes the system to be able to make that happen.
Yeah, I love that. I appreciate it, and I know that we've got a short amount of time here. We got to get back in. I think Vivian Howard is about to cook for us and tell us how not to burn things. At least I got to pay attention for that. Well, it's always good seeing you. You're probably always the best dressed man in town. Good to see you and hear you today. Sig, we'll see you somewhere around today, later tonight. Thank you,
Max.
Appreciate it.
Pleasure.
And right now we have the pleasure of speaking with Reagan Green Pruitt, who is the Vice President, hold on now, of Integrated Marketing and Community Engagement for Blue Cross Blue Shield of North Carolina.
Longest title ever, yes.
Yeah, I think seriously.
You win, yeah.
Yes.
Like your email signature, people must be like,
it's awesome.
Well, thank you for being here. You kind of closed down the show with some great news. Maybe you could start off by just mentioning, obviously we're here at Thrive, but that was a pretty cool thing when we were talking about school lunches and school programs. What is it that I'm alluding to?
So Thrive NC is all about driving awareness of food insecurities in our state, sparking the dialogue on what we can do about it. And it is a complex challenge that the state of North Carolina is facing, and it's not going to happen overnight, and it's not going to happen with just one key stakeholder or leader doing one thing. One of the speakers earlier today talked about we're going to have to shift from fragmented decision making to integrated decision making. Exactly. And so what we wanted to do was really show our commitment out of the gate, even beyond Thrive. We made some pretty significant investments and donations to our charitable partners that are already tackling these issues in our state. And we wanted to then really end Thrive with an announcement that the room heard for the first time today. We haven't actually even launched it to media yet, so you all are hearing it first as well.
Boom.
And so across the nation, schools are facing significant challenges with school lunch debt. And so at the end of the year, trying to make budgets, they're really having to make some trade-off decisions between curriculum and pencil, paper, and beyond, and paying off their school lunch debt. And so what we did is we looked at in North Carolina, what is the hungriest area in North Carolina and the counties that are facing the most school lunch debt in our state, and the Piedmont jumped out right off the page. So if you look back at 2013, which is actually the most recent statistic there is, the Piedmont in North Carolina was ranked the second hungriest in the nation, not just the state, in the nation.
That's so surprising.
It's surprising, and it is really disappointing, and really caused alarm for us at Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. And so what we decided to do was for 5 counties in the Piedmont is to go to those schools and pay off that lunch debt so that the schools can continue to focus on curriculum and obviously putting healthy foods on the plates of students moving forward.
Wow, that's Blue Cross Blue Shield of North Carolina that was paying off those debts.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that's amazing, and charitable, hospitable, and everything. How does it though ensure future success to set them up to know how to make that budget work for proper school lunch in the future?
Well, the future.
Just ask him again next year.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, like calling my mom, going a little tight on funds this month.
That's right. That's right. Our goal today and with Thrive NC and moving forward is to start a movement and get people to really build on the momentum. And so in total for Thrive, we've given about $450,000, including that school lunch payoff, to start this momentum. And so it's looking at what can we do that's going to have the most impact. So we felt like that was a good impact to start now. Yeah. And I think as we unfold and as these conversations are happening locally, regionally, across the state, we need to prioritize and determine maybe it is school debt. Maybe it is, getting the rural farmers more access to connecting with schools and otherwise, and the crop insurance. Yeah. So it's prioritizing to determine where we can have the most impact with food insecurities and then investing there.
Yeah. So maybe we could figure out a good way and maybe put some of that money into industries that would really help out, like a school lunch program, and actually have children eat good food at a good cost.
Right. And summer nutrition, when you read the facts, it is just, again, astonishing at how many kids in our state truly do not know where their next meal is going to come from. And, we talk a lot about money and investment, and that's one of the messages that I wanted to be clear on today, is that it's well beyond money. So checks can can be written by whatever stakeholder, but it's really a change in mindset. It's a change in how we think, how we make decisions, again, regionally, locally. It's coming together. A lot of the conversations that I had with folks attending the summit today, hey, I want to be a part of a committee. I want to be a part of decisions. I want to figure out how to drive this forward, but I'm sitting here in my county and I don't know how to get to be a part of this bigger movement, and we're excited that Blue Cross Blue Shield is going to lead the way in that. So that's really our next step, is how can we transition the passion and energy that we felt in the room today at the summit into action.
So great point. How does that affect individually? Because most of the listeners that we're talking about now, they most likely are not food insecure or not hungry. They obviously have either a phone or the means to listen to a podcast and know how to listen to a podcast. So how can they individually, if they're lost, they're not really necessarily involved in the culinary world directly, what's their first sort of steps to really make a change?
So the first step is really awareness. So many people in our state do not realize, and 4 statistics stand out to me. One, that 1 in 3 of our children are obese or overweight. Number 2, that 1 in 4 of our children in our state are at risk for going hungry. Yeah. Number 3, that our adults that do even have access to foods, only 7.2% of adults are actually getting the amount of healthy foods that they need. And then number 4 is that we continuously rank in the top 10 for senior hunger being the worst in our state. And we are just moving in the wrong direction. We're consistently in the top 10 for most insecure. And when you step back and look at what is the center point, what is the foundation and the common ground, it's food. And the food tie to health is again just very direct, and what you feed yourself and put in your body, whether you're a kid in 2nd grade or you're a senior, is just having a lot of impacts on cost for our state and healthcare and outcomes and overall quality of life.
Yeah, I guess I'm just wondering, because I know that I look at it, my situation, and in the morning, my wife is running to work. I'm running out the door to work, and we have to feed our son and give him breakfast. He's less than 2 years old. So real tangible things that I can do tomorrow for my son and that my neighbor can do as well.
So I do think it's twofold. One is in your own circle. And again, most of us here today are fortunate enough not to be facing the food insecurity challenge. And so it's, focusing on purchasing healthy foods and fruits and vegetables. And when you are packing, your children's lunch, I'm a working mom of an 8-year-old daughter, and I'm not the best at packing lunch. That's something that I'm automatically going to take from this on what I need.
I can't stand making lunches in the morning.
I know. I can't either.
Laborious.
And, I throw in, things that they're processed, and, she loves fruit roll-ups. And I'm like, okay, have a fruit roll-up. So I think it's those small changes that you can make in your own life with your own children, and frankly, with your own nutrition, is making sure that you are getting the recommended amount of, healthy fruits and vegetables. You're staying away from processed foods. And then the second part would be looking around your own community. And again, we had a lot of regional and statewide and frankly national leaders in the room today. But I think a good first tangible step for your listeners would be to look at your own community, look at your own county, understand, are you a food insecure county? Is there a school debt in your county that you could go help pay off the school lunch debt for a school to help with that? Do you own land or have access to land? One of the most creative ideas that I'm hearing about and we're learning more from Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina's perspective is if you don't have access to land, how do you actually grow a garden on a blacktop? And so that would be something to help, because this is so complex and it's in all 100 counties. But Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina we don't have the resources to be diagnosing every single county. Identifying what you could do in your own county. And again, reaching out to us as the experts and helping to get you connected with the right people for the conversation.
Is there places to go on your website or your literature?
We have a Community Works website, and we have contact information, and that's just our general support of our mission. So, how do we tackle social determinants of health, food insecurities being one of them, and helping with health and inequities and all of these things that food insecurities are leading to. And so we do have resources there that you can reach out to, because we're looking at ways to deliver on our mission, which is to improve the health and well-beings of our citizens.
Well, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
I appreciate the time. Oh, go ahead.
I have one more question. Yes. In light of that, how does Blue Cross Blue Shield in North Carolina start this conversation? Like, obviously, you have some corporate responsibility that you almost have like quotas on that you need to be involved in. But who brings to the table? Hey, we need. There's this epidemic, let's call it, in North Carolina. Who brings that to the table, and how does that get started? Okay, let's get behind this and create Thrive.
So a couple of different ways. First, we have a really talented team at Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina, consistently looking at the health of our state, and health meaning a lot of things, the determinants of health. So whether it be transportation, whether it be, population management, case management, food insecurities across the board. So we have people looking at that all the time from a data perspective. We also look to the community. So we just made a big announcement a couple of months ago about investing $50 million additional into our communities. And have really, we came up with a few that we announced through a press release of what we thought made sense based on the data and the knowledge that we have on our citizens and challenges facing our state. But also, we consistently have people. We have an RFP out there. It's online on here's what we're focused on. If you think you have an idea, or your company, or your, from an entrepreneur perspective, or just have an idea, there's a way that on the website outline on how to get that idea to us, and we vet and prioritize that. So we are open. We're here for the state. This is our state. We are Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. We've been here for nearly 85 years now. And again, we're just beginning, and we aren't going to come up with all the good ideas. So we're open to hearing from whoever has a good one.
Are you open to changing the shade of blue for your North Carolina?
Unless it's to Carolina blue, because I'm a Tar Heel fan.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. It's
no,
the wrong blue.
No.
I don't know. It's kind of like Dodger blue. I'm okay with that. But I'm from LA, so don't listen to me.
So our headquarters in Chicago would say a big no to that.
Just make an exception for one state. Come on. Then I guess you'd have to do it in like Kentucky and go Wildcat blue.
That's right. We have 36. Yes.
So.
Well, thank you very much, Reagan, for taking time with us to enlighten us. It is nice to speak with someone from a company like Blue Cross Blue Shield, where, sometimes you don't see a face, sometimes you don't hear their perspective of what they're doing, and it's important. And it is important to have help from a big company that might have financial opportunities to do these things, but also just community outreach. So it was great that Blue Cross Blue Shield came in and helped support Thrive NC, collected all these people to put together and deliver a great message. So I appreciate it. Thank you for taking time with us.
Yeah, thanks for taking time with us. And again, the message, I think, is become aware of food waste, food insecurity, and get involved, and then everybody will eat and drink more merrily.
And as the sun sets on Friday night as Thrive NC ends, we are treated with a song from Joe Kwan and Friends, featuring Neela Pekarik, Ben Soli, Paul DeFiglia, Sergio Ortega, and Leonard Llewellyn Godwin.
Guests of the NC-F&B podcast receive a swag bag, including gifts from these exceptional North Carolina producers: Social House Vodka, Hungry Harvest, Alley 26 Tonic Syrup, Michael's English Muffins, Larry's Beans and 42 in Lawrence, Ramona Wine Coolers, and Happy Hour Vitamins. Thanks for listening to the NC-F&B podcast. I am the voice, Brian Hoyle. And if you've stuck with us this long, review us on iTunes, and remember, 5 stars are encouraged.